Your legacy was one of death and destruction.
The power of one, the power of two, the power of many.
G'day! It's finally official. Straight from the Lucasfilm website, after 14 years, Kathleen Kennedy is stepping down as President of Lucasfilm. Hooray! To be replaced by dangerous Dave Filoni and Lynwen Brennan. She is not retiring, however, but instead will shift her focus to producing further movies.
She can't do that. Shoot her or something.
Despite the rather evocative intro, Kennedy's Lucasfilm legacy is not as black and white as fans or Hollywood would have us believe, with many of the former camp decrying her as a she-witch that ruined Star Wars with progressive ideologies and feminist politics, readily referencing the failures that occurred on her watch, and the latter hailing her as a successful trailblazer, keenly citing the box office takes and various accolades of the successes. But, as we all know,
only a Sith deals in absolutes.
the reality of Kennedy's legacy is one that should be judged based on lasting cultural significance versus corporate profitability. And despite her words to the contrary, Kennedy is a corporate profits woman first and a creator second. It's why her career has been one of a producer rather than a director or writer. The profitability piece of Kennedy's tenure is easy enough to champion. Any film that makes more than $1 billion profit at the box office is considered a success, even if it completely splits a fandom that has stood for over 40 years, or costs $500 million to make before marketing. To Hollywood, money is money. But if one was to apply an objective eye to the box office takings of each Disney Star Wars release, one might notice something curious.
It is evolving, just backwards.
Despite all the talk of billion-dollar success. This was the moment decades of pre-existing general audience fan expectation, which saw The Force Awakens break box office records in 2015, collided with the reality that Disney Star Wars was not going to be the next expanded universe, nor was it going to be George Lucas's sequel trilogy, or even internally consistent within itself.
All remaining systems will bow to the First Order!
5 minutes later.
I'm the spy.
Despite the groundwork of this inevitable disappointment being laid during The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi was the entry that copped 2 films worth of backlash, with The Force Awakens being nothing but a 2-hour teaser trailer for Luke Skywalker's story, only for Rian Johnson to give fans what they absolutely weren't expecting. There is much more I could say about J.J. Abrams, but he is not the focus of this video. But he'll get his time, don't you bloody worry about that. This corporate lens of Kennedy's career is also why, in her boilerplate puff piece exit article from Deadline, Kennedy's only disclosed regret in her time as president of Lucasfilm is Solo, because it was undeniably a financial failure that Disney couldn't hide behind streamer metrics, as Disney Plus was still a few years away. But I doubt many of you are here to discuss the black and red profit margins of the sequel trilogy. You're more interested in their cultural impact.
Rey Skywalker.
What the hell is even that?
Prior to 2015, despite the floundering Lucas Arts, Star Wars was still a culturally relevant and profitable brand, still selling original trilogy and prequel era merchandise even a decade after Revenge of the Sith had left cinemas. This is what cinematic cultural relevance looks like. It endures, spans generations, and leaves a lasting impact on the fans, whom are only too eager to support that via their wallets. Look no further than the triumphantly profitable return of Revenge of the Sith to cinemas in 2025 for its anniversary. Meanwhile, a decade after The Force Awakens, sequel-era merchandise has all but vanished, with Hasbro omitting sequel-era characters from their Lucasfilm 50th anniversary toy line, but curiously including Clone Wars Season 7 characters.
How interesting.
Galaxy's Edge, the Disney theme park constructed exclusively as a sequel-era location, because the future of Star Wars isn't behind us, has finally announced that the park will feature characters and music from all eras of Star Wars, namely icons like Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker. I wonder why that could be. Things were worse on Disney Plus, with the exception of the critically acclaimed Andor, whose success probably had nothing to do with the fact that it wasn't in the sequel era, but rather proximate to the original trilogy. It's a banger and I encourage you to watch it if you haven't mentioned already, and perhaps the first couple of seasons of The Mandalorian, viewership dried up quickly. Series failed to get renewed to the point where they were casually neglected to be mentioned in the Deadline exit interview. Again, I wonder why.
$100 million.
Following the initial nostalgic hype of the possibility of seeing Han, Luke and Leia again in The Force Awakens, nothing from the sequel period, nor perhaps the wider Disney Star Wars era, has achieved anything close to a lasting cinematic cultural relevance. Well, apart from the absolute disgust that most legacy fans have seeing Han, Luke and Leia disposed of so unceremoniously. That, unfortunately, will endure. Worse, the brand has atrophied, its declined speed run to the point of irrelevance on the big screen for the sake of Disney's quarterly earnings.
Ironic.
Disney Star Wars games, a bag so mixed of high highs and impressively low lows, it's hard to believe that they've got the same name on their games. Almost as if one of the first things Kennedy approved under the Disney merger was to shut down LucasArts, cancel the eagerly awaited Boba Fett 1313 game, and raise Lucasfilm Games, a third-party publisher that hoards Star Wars' IP out like a Tatooine slave owner.
Only money.
Never forget that loot box fiasco. But as bad as things were for Star Wars, other stories didn't even survive contact with the new leadership. And for old favourites, both financially and critically, worse.
To do this.
Me too.
Come on, let's go! Why are they doing this? Just run! Oh god, what have they done?
Now, I've already done a video where I went full spectrum warrior on Kennedy's presidency, which includes my thoughts on her socio-political aspirations and an assessment of how much blame she should be saddled with vis-a-vis the sequels. Spoilers, it was a great deal. But the Council of Brainless Wisdom ultimately concurred that she was a naive tool that lacked creative understanding of Star Wars, thus leading to its desecration by unworthy hands, rather than being its architect or primary instrument of destruction. Those honours go to these two gentlemen.
Just call him an asshole!
But when looking at her time in the chair retrospectively, regardless of the media fluff pieces and assorted accolades, the profits have unlikely outweighed the expenses. And they've definitely not been worth the cultural cost endured by Star Wars fans. In short, despite the money spent or gained, the Disney Star Wars era has given us nothing of cultural value, and yet taken so much. Under Kennedy, Star Wars went from this cinema-going experience that defined two generations to a fledgling IP only spoken about in Remember When-isms. A brand that would undoubtedly be worth more today if Lucas never sold it, or even if he had, Disney had simply put it on the shelf and waited. All that said, Kennedy stepping down as president of Lucasfilm is unlikely to change the current trajectory of Star Wars. For starters, she's still a producer. While I hold a curious optimism... No, that's too strong a word. Morbid curiosity about Starfighter, anything with Dave Filoni's stamp on it is going to have the same problems as the Ahsoka series. Dangerous Dave, in fact, may even be a worse custodian than Kennedy. Whereas Kennedy was a well-meaning, ill-informed, agenda-peddling corporate people-pleaser, at least it was a lucky dip in terms of the writer-directors she chose, occasionally picking a winner. Dave is a canon-altering I Know Better prequel messiah. What
I've been able to do on Clone Wars is the same thing that George was doing in the prequels, which is, George liked Aayla Secura. Aayla Secura gets pulled out of the comic books and now she's walking in the Jedi Temple. And I've always leaned towards if we're going to create something, we should check and see if it existed already to the fans, because it has way more value if we bring that in. And It's like, why would I just replace it with something new?
On record stating that he didn't like Andor because it wasn't child-friendly enough.
His taken is different, like Andor. It's so well done, and Tony and his team do such a phenomenal job that I think that there's an audience for that.
My brother once told me that nothing someone says before the word but really counts.
I think also with that audience, I also though want to still be, hitting the imagination of the kids out there so that they can grow up and appreciate those things. Otherwise, we're to imagine that everyone's going to come and pretend that they're George Lucas, and I'll tell you right away, they're not. Like, I learned from George, but I'm certainly not the same as George when it comes to making movies. I mean, George is a one of a kind, generational talent. I like wolves and put them in my Star Wars. We're just different.
Failure.
whose only interest is crowbarring his Disney princess Ahsoka into anything and everything he can. A man so obsessed with his own ideas that he's forgotten anything Lucas may have taught him. And someone who never learned the difference between entertainment appropriate for all ages and childish. Mark my words, Skipper, things can get worse. Particularly if you're holding on to hope that we'll ever see something as cinematically mature as Andor again. But I refuse to end this on a sour note. So here's some footage of Bix on the beach. Hooroo, mate.